Anytime you have a story to tell, like a big change, you need music to back it up because it has an emotional impact. And coming back to what I said about the music being the soundtrack to a brand, if there ever was a need for music to make a change, like a massive pivot change, then it's there. So a brand that's making a big radical change or an innovation or a massive move or an acquisition, then that's a really good time to use music to tell the emotional side of that story.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Dragon Rouge On. I'm your host, James Byrne, Global Marketing Director at Dragon Rouge. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Anthony Vanger, Managing Director UK for Sixième Son, the sonic branding agency. Anthony, it's great to have you with us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Very excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Our pleasure. First of all, it's great to have you on the other side of the virtual table. Anthony has his own podcast series, This Week in Music, which I strongly recommend. From those pods, I got a really good feeling of your passion for music and really being able to read music on a deeper level than perhaps most people are able to read it. It was also super interesting to listen to the interview with Ricardo about the music business and how artists are making money these days. Super insightful. I had no idea about the harsh reality of the industry, so really good to know.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a good, really, really insightful interview.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're here today to talk about sonic branding, what it is, how it's evolving, and some opportunities for brands out there that might be listening. Dragon Rouge and Sixième Son go back a long way through our mutually French roots, and we've worked together on many projects across the world together, most recently on Petronas through our Singapore office. So Anthony, first question, kind of an idiot-proof question for those, and I need that for me. For those out there listening that perhaps aren't experts, what is sonic branding?
Yep. So what I decided to do for this question was I thought that I would just get like a definition, and then talk a little bit around it. So
nice.
Sonic branding is sometimes referred to as audio branding, and it's really fundamentally it's the strategic use of sound as part of a brand's identity. So it's not a jingle or a ditty, right? But it's rather like the soundtrack of a brand. So to kind of take that a little bit further, if you imagine a film starting and you hear the main theme, like, Star Wars, that's the main theme of the movie. And most audience members recognize it as such. They usually can hear the hook, And as the movie evolves, the composer adapts the theme to the action, supporting the emotional message of the story. And that's really what sonic branding does. So, and now, because there's a sort of ever-growing number of touch points where the customer encounters a brand, and if you think of those touch points as being moments in a film, right? Because when you engage with a brand, you're usually doing stuff, there's action, either online or on the street. Then that gives the brand the opportunity to own that moment. Many brands do it really well. And as we'll chat in this discussion, I think that more brands are understanding the importance of kind of owning that moment. And to give you a really good example of like good sonic branding, so just recently, like last year, I got onto Revolut, and they have an app, and the UI UX sounds on the app are really good. So you can tell they really spent the time and making sure they were good. Now, I've been married for 20 years. And so, I mean, we haven't had apps for 20 years, but in the last 10, 15 years, I don't think my wife has ever mentioned anything about a sound. And the first time she ever did was, she said, "What is that?" I said, "That's the sound for Revolut." She goes, "Oh, it's really good." And it made an impact on me because it really shows that even a sound that is used to authenticate the transfer of funds, or the fact that your funds have gone through to another person's account, or you've been able to pay someone, which is what Revolut does really well. Even that sound, if you really get it right, you own that sound. And it really it really helps your brand, because people want to know what that brand is. And, you know, she didn't go out and become a Revolut customer, but it really shows you the power of what sonic branding can do. So I think that's probably the best answer.
Nice way to see it impact someone else.
Yeah, exactly.
And how did you personally get into sonic branding? What's your journey, and
My
why
journey,
CC?
you know, yeah, like many people, you know, I started out as a musician. I was in bands, you know, made records, we were signed, and then obviously the music business went through a pretty radical change towards the end of you know, around 97 through 99. And during that period, I started doing ads, and then music for TV, and then music for film, music, you know, music supervision for film. And then I kind of moved into sonic, because for me, it was sort of like really the purest form of music for advertising. It's kind of a natural progression. It has a very strategic element to it that regular composition for film, TV, and ads don't have. You know, you've really got to get to know the brand. You've got to get to know the customer, its objectives. And you know, I'd gone to business school about, you know, 10, 15 years ago, and I came out of there, and I wanted to try to find a way to combine the things that I'd studied at business school that I was intrigued with, which was, you know, everything about the brand and managing change and strategy and all these things. And so sonic branding was really a way to combine those things. You know, when we start working, certainly when we've worked together, you know, we start talking about a brand or what a brand can do, you've really, before I give an answer, I've really got to kind of do some research, think about it, look at what the competitors are doing, look at what, you know, peers are doing, look at what people are doing right, look at what people are doing wrong, where the brand was and where it's going, what its problems are, what its share price is. You know, I mean, it's really important. You know, someone showed me the other day that Estee Lauder's share price is down by 40%, which is, you know, for this year, which is radical. And as I went on to their advertising platforms, I can see that they're not performing well on TikTok. They don't have an advertising strategy that's really working in today's market. And so, yeah, it's, to me, it sort of combines all the things that interest me. And then it has this incredibly pure form of music, which is really coming up with melody. And as I explained before, like if you imagine like a soundtrack, you start actually getting into quite a emotional and technical production of that sound. So I think it's kind of a cool place to be.
For sure. And why Sixième Son? What makes Sixième Son unique within the sonic branding world?
So I think it's really easy to answer that. So why Sixième Son now? I mean, to me, they're the best there are a lot of really good music companies out there, and I've had the good fortune of working for a couple of them, and they all do what they do well. But I think what really defines Sixième Son is, I compare them to like an haute couture house in Paris, and the French have really done this, from, you know, Yves Saint Laurent to Chanel, and even Louis Vuitton with all their, you know, their products. They make them, first of all, they design them very well, and then they really make them beautifully, and they don't farm out the making of their, you know, high quality products to anyone else. You know, like a dress, haute couture dress is made in Paris. You've got the guy who chooses the fabric, you've got the woman who does the seam, or a woman or man who does the seam, you've got the person who does the collar. So you have all these specialists that are involved in creating this unique piece, you know, which is sort of a mixture of art and also function, because someone's got to wear it. So Sixième Son does everything in-house. The other sonic shops, you know, the big ones at least, for the most part, they farm out the production to freelancers. Now, I'm not saying that's good or bad, right? They produce it and they ideate, so they come up with the concepts. But for me, that's only 10 to 20% of the job, right? So it's 10% inspiration, 90% perspiration, right? The reality is that the technical and both on the sort of technical side in terms of the actual equipment they use, but also the technical side in terms of the actual playing of the music, is really 90% of the job. And so the real job for me in sonic branding is, you need a great concept, and you have to, it has to work for the brand, but then you actually have to produce it. So what they've done is they've set up a studio in Paris, and they have an unusual system. They use PCs and not Apples, which is really unusual in the music
Amazing.
world. Yeah. And they've done it in a way with a program that allows everybody to work on a piece of music at the same time. So it's very iterative. And what that means, again, coming back to the idea of a dress, if you're working on a dress, it's not like you're working on the dress, right? It's right there in the middle of the room. And so they're not working individually, and they're not competing against each other in a way that other music houses have other composers competing, because those composers don't know what the other composers are doing. So you kind of get this febrile teamwork, but there is competition, but I think it's like a sort of, it creates this real team spirit, and it means that everybody's moving in the same direction. And I think from what I've heard, it really creates fantastic product. They combine the live instruments, right? So a lot of the guys play really well, and they combine it with this, with the latest production technology, which all the music houses have. But you put the two together in that structure, plus the strong creative, and I think it creates a superior product. And so that's what attracted me to Sixième Son.
Yeah, a nice analogy with the fashion house as well. I really like that. And what about just best in class sonic branding? What do you absolutely love, and what's made you go wow over the years? I mean, maybe most people, when they think of Sonic, they think of jingles. They might think of McDonald's, Intel, maybe Danone. But what for you is best sonic branding?
So I like melody, because I think melody is emotion. I think Mickey D's is great, and it's very flexible. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. It just kind of captures the brand. And I think, honestly, I think it's done the brand a lot of favors, because, Mickey D's has had a lot of problems in the way people perceive it. And, its carbon footprint, and it's cheap. So it feeds 2% of the world's population every day, which is astonishing statistic. But I think that melody elevates the brand, and it's very flexible. So one of the problems, and this is a really interesting point, right? One of the problems with Sonic and branding in general is that we're sort of locked in a death wall with advertising agencies, because you've got 30 seconds, even if it's online, you've got a minimal amount of time to tell a story for a particular campaign. And what creatives hate is, losing 1.5 to 2, maybe 3 seconds to come out of the story and to have the logo there, right? And then let's say you're playing a track that's you've licensed for $1 million, like Bittersweet Symphony, or the Doors or whatever, and then all of a sudden you've got ba-da-ba-ba-ba, and it sounds like a train wreck. So I think one of the reasons why sonic branding has struggled to exist in campaign is that a lot of the logos are not flexible, and also the creatives and the branding agencies and the sonic agencies haven't figured out a way to come out of the music. So let's say Mickey D's famously, they use the Minions, right? And then it goes ba-da-ba-ba-ba. So they actually did a Minions version of it. So it's really good. So I think you get a kind of double hit. And I think the movie studios have been very good at doing this with their visuals. So if you think about Batman, for example, like the opening sequence of Batman, I think it's Warner. So instead of the regular Warner visual logo, it actually starts to go dark and Batman-y, before the
Gotham
movie
City
actually starts. Yeah, it's really
awesome.
good. And I think that Sonic needs to do that. So I think that Mickey D's has done a really good job. I like Apple, that's a minimal one, but it is tuneful. It's one note, but it's tuneful. And of course, when it comes on, it's got like 100% brand recognition. And then I think the last one, which is an interesting one, which is one I didn't know that Sixième Son had done, but it's one that I've heard all, for a good chunk of my life, which is the SNCF one, which is the French trains, which are the Eurostar. You hear it when you get off the train at the Gare du Nord, coming from St Pancras, ba 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 ba, and you hear it around France. It's really good because it's so, I don't know, man. It's just so catchy and weird, and it just,
you just know where you are straight away.
Yeah, you know where you are, man.
You're in France.
It actually tastes of France, right? It's like it's got a taste. So I think that those three probably, Mickey D's, Apple, which is not flexible, and then the SNCF are probably the ones that I like the most just off the bat. But there are many that I like. But I think those three definitely deserve, special mention.
Yeah, great. I was in the studio earlier and just having lunch, and somebody's Zoom started going off, and you could hear that, that Zoom ringtone. And I just thought, man, that takes me back to the pandemic and being stuck at home, and I wondered, sometimes the sonic is so strong, especially with Zoom and Skype and those guys. But I wonder, in the case of Zoom, if they need to move it on because it reminds everyone of being stuck at home.
Trauma.
Maybe for some that's a good connotation.
Trauma. Well, I think I think you make a really good point, which is a lot of brands, spend money on branding. So we're talking to a brand in Spain right now, whose name I shall not mention, but they have a very strong brand. The company is very successful, but they're very reluctant to change the brand. So they haven't updated, and all of a sudden they look very dated, and I think it's really important for brands to update. A really good one would be the Champions League, or Intel. They actually, if you listen to the original iteration of the Champions League or Intel, they're very much the same notes, but they've updated them very cleverly so that they don't sound, like Coldplay 2013. Which is what everything sounded like in 2013, Coldplay, right? And now they sound like, I don't know, Fred again, or whoever it is that's the new flavor, right? So you've got to stay up. You've got to stay up on it. And I think if you do, then you avoid that sort of Pavlovian, it reminds you of something bad. But I never really thought about the Zoom sound making reminding everybody about the dark times of COVID.
Yeah, but I think a really good example, the Champions League you mentioned, such a bold choice, in the early 90s to go for classical music rather than rock music, right? Because rock would have been the kind of, or something more upbeat would have been the obvious choice. But I think it's just worked so well for them over the years.
It's fantastic. I mean, my son, and I, we watched it together, and all his friends, and there's this palpable excitement. And that's what I was talking about, right, before, about the execution of music. So it's very much like the Champions League is very much a case of just getting a composer who just absolutely nailed it, right? Nailed every aspect of it, the orchestrations. Yeah, it sounds like Handel's The Messiah, but it doesn't matter, right? He took it and turned it on its head, and they wrote the lyrics in the studio, and it's brilliant. It's brilliant. So sometimes sonic branding is about that. It's about that, lightning strike and just doing something that just happens to be, just great. I'm sure the same thing happens with visual branding, but with music as well. Sometimes you kind of need to get lucky.
Yeah. And it seems to be going through a pretty significant period of growth at the moment, if I'm not mistaken, just by what we're seeing, in our world at Dragon Rouge. Why would you say it's such a fast growing industry at the moment?
I think that right now, you would say that sonic branding is moving from niche to mainstream, right? So I think that sonic branding kind of had its heyday, or started with the jingle in the 50s in the States, where, you know, often you sang the name of the brand. And then, you know, for reasons we just chatted about, you know, campaign took over and it really became about the advertising and not so much about the brand building. And I think that now that's coming back a little bit. You know, brand building is becoming more important again. And I think that the number of touch points that a brand now has. So there's the number, we talked about that before with Revolut, the number of times when your interaction with the brand actually there's a sound involved. So that's a big deal. And also you have this sort of always on volume platforms like, you know, podcasts. So, you know, people at work listening to podcasts, not a visual. So there's a lot of advertising on podcasts, as you know. It's, you know, hoovering up advertising dollars. So I think that you know, and wearables and people listening to, you know, to podcasts and news and working with podcasts. So you have this kind of environment where you have sort of change in the way people perceive how the brand is. And so I'm not saying that jingles are coming back, but you definitely feel that brands want to establish themselves more, want people to recognize them more. And then you've got the touch points. And then you got the fact that people are just spending more time listening to stuff. So I think there's that. And then on the industry side, so on the supply side, so that's on the demand side. On the supply side, you have a, you know, large agency, which is Landor, you know, part of the WPP family. And they bought AMP, which is a German sonic branding company. And as a result, you know, many branding agencies are now offering sonic as part of their services from the get-go to sort of make sure that they don't fall behind, because, you know, you have a major player in the industry that's kind of coming out there and saying, yeah, we'll do your rebrand. And by the way, you should definitely think about sonic. So everyone's like, whoa, hold on a minute. So we need to get up to speed on sonic as well. So I think that those forces are playing a positive role in sort of taking it from the niche. You know, we used to have to spend a lot of time educating people, you know. Now we don't. Now it's moved on from there, and it's more like, I know what sonic branding is. I know I want it. I just don't know how it applies to me. So, you know, it's a very different conversation.
Great stuff. And how do you see sonic branding evolving?
So I think that technology can really play a part. So we're at Sixième Son, and many of the other houses kind of have their AI stroke platform stroke whatever. And, you know, AI is it sounds pretty good. If the ingredients are good, the AI can actually take those ingredients and it's really kind of jiggling it around and making sure that it fits. But, you know, it's getting better and better. So I think that in a couple of years, you're going to find technology is going to play a bigger role in allowing brands to use their sonic assets in a more flexible way across many different touch points.
Great. So sonic is an industry where AI is seen as an aid rather than a threat, right?
I think so, because at the end of the day, you know, we've been using AI for, well, first of all, the music business got wiped out by AI, which was the MP3, right? That was was our, you know, that was our Armageddon moment. So, and since then, you know, you've got all the platforms like Logic and Pro Tools. They all use AI, Melodyne to tune the vocals. You know, you've got Logic's drummer, you've got all these sounds and different tools that you can use, GarageBand on phones. So I think we're quite used to it. At the end of the day, you still need a good tune. You still need a good concept, and you still need to understand the brand. I don't think as of yet AI is going to be able to do that. What AI can do is take what we've done and then allow you to better and quicker use those assets for very specific, you know, touch points and content without having to, you know, either get your intern to do it, who's, you know, apparently good at Logic, or call up the music house, and there's this just back and forth, and it's a total nightmare. So I think it's saving time, and the product is not bad. It's not for a 30-second ad yet, right? Not yet. Still 30-second ad, you still need, you know, but as it gets better, there's no reason why that couldn't happen.
And which brands or categories do you think could best benefit from investing in their sonic brand?
I think that fundamentally a brand with a lot of touch points that produces a lot of visual content or is on audio platforms could really benefit, because as I've said before, many people are coming into contact with their brands where there's no visual, right? And having an audio recognition can only build your brand, right? Having said that, it's also brands that are trying to, so it goes two ways. So let's say a brand, B2B, there's no such thing as B2B, it's all B2C. I think everyone kind of agrees with that now. The brand is communicating to their customers, but they're also communicating to their talent. And I think that a brand that has a cohesive, modern approach to how it sounds, right, as opposed to just using stock music or crappy, library music, what it does is it says to potential hires, people who are going to work there, that this brand really has got its act together. And I think that brands that really want to attract the best talent, the marketing, all the boxes of their marketing, yes, it has to appeal to their customers, but it also has to appeal to their talent. And so music is a huge way to engage with young people. Most young people, that they're hiring early on will be probably consuming most of their time listening to music, right? That's what young people do. And they do other things, but I can't mention it on the podcast, but they do those things while listening to music as well, right? But music is a big player. So a brand that just goes, it's not important. Well, I think that they're at a disadvantage. So yeah, I think that brands with a lot of touch points, brands that make a lot of content, and brands that want to be perceived in the marketplace as being relevant, up to date, cool places to work, can use music to tell that story. And lastly, is one other thing, a brand that's making a big transition. So for example, a brand, an energy company that's going from energy to renewables, a construction company that's going to, using only renewable. Anytime you have a story to tell, like a big change, you need music to back it up, because it has an emotional impact. And coming back to what I said about the music being the soundtrack to a brand, if there ever was a need for music to make a change, like a massive pivot change, then it's there. So a brand that's making a big radical change or an innovation or a massive move or an acquisition, then that's a really good time to use music to tell the emotional side of that story.
Yeah, excellent. And last of the main questions, you were talking about this the other day. Tell us about some of the cool stuff you're seeing now with TikTok and other social media engagements through Sonic.
So, we're always trying to come up with ideas to extend the engagement, right? So, we're working with a brand at the moment, and the Sonic logo for the brand is played on a guitar. It's a very prominent guitar sound. So originally we went to the brand and said, why don't we do a remix, and we'll use TikTok, we'll do a call to action, we'll get a bunch of kids to do remixes, and then it's not a competition. Anyone who's doing good stuff, you take the video and you put it through the brand's own TikTok channel, right? Usually these brands, usually if you're doing that, the brand's got millions and millions of followers. In this particular case, the brand has 21 million followers on TikTok. Okay. So it's a pretty good chunk of people. But then we thought, well, why don't we try and do something different? And, one of the struggles with brands is obviously to get them to pay for these things, right? So we always try to bring in somebody else who's going to actually cough up the money. So it turns out that, the guitar part was played on a very famous guitar. So we're now reaching out to the guitar company. Of course, they had no idea that their guitar was responsible for this iconic brand's new Sonic logo. And you can already see the excitement, so we can very quickly turn that around into a call to action. And so what we did, or what we're doing, is we're using our phone in the studio in Paris to film the musicians playing the theme on the guitar. We'll use TikTok to show the chords, like, just super TikTok-y. It'll be like, I don't know, 12-second video. And the beauty of that is that you don't have to like write a storyboard, tell them you're going to shoot it, edit it, add the effects. You just literally shoot it right on TikTok. And that's it. That's what it's going to look like. That's the end product, right? And so it's very exciting to be able to do that. So that's one of the things that we're doing. The other thing that we do is, talking about platforms, Spotify is another platform. There are some brands out there that need to own their Spotify page. And those are brands where music plays a pivotal role. And that can be a car company, that can be a wellness company, it can be a hotel company, obviously it could be sports company. And, we haven't invented this. The NBA equals hip hop equals the NBA. The NBA owns its Spotify page. The players and the musicians, it's a perfect symbiotic relationship, right? Where if the NBA didn't have its NBA Spotify page, then they would just be missing out this incredible opportunity to brand their page, and also, B, interact with their audience by giving them playlists, interviews, all this stuff. So Spotify, is now the biggest podcast platform in the world by some distance, now after it got that guy, Joe Rogan, or whatever his name is. And so, we can do stuff like, let's say an airline company, you could have a pilot, with his phone, just saying, "Hi guys, this is, Jeffrey so I'm flying to, New York, and I love listening to, I don't know, Handel's Messiah when I do my check through of the plane," or whatever, and you could post that on TikTok, or you could have pilots' favorite playlists for an airline. You could have, or you could have interviews with artists taking certain planes, or you could bring in a third-party sponsor to kind of do a co-podcast or a co-playlist. So it's just a way of using these platforms to engage people in an authentic way. But again, it's got to be done right. It's got to add value. It's got to be entertaining. And if it is, then it's great, because that's an ongoing, evergreen asset. And of course, you can integrate your visual brand, your sonic brand, and anything else you want to do on that platform in between. So you've really just sort of taken this sort of barren wasteland, and you've watered it, and you've turned it into, something that works. So I think that's that's what we're doing with brands. We're encouraging them to do that. And I think you'll see over the next, 18 months, you'll see the smart brands jumping on that and looking at NBA and the NFL and some of the American brands and going, yeah, I'll have some of that. I'll try that out. I'll put some money into that. And, the other thing about it's actually quite affordable, because asking a pilot to do a self video on TikTok. I mean, you've got to do it right? But if you do it right, you don't need a big crew. It's actually all quite homemade and sort of intimate, and that's what people want.
Yeah, big opportunity area. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so because this is about music and Sixième Son is a sonic branding agency, I thought we could finish on a quick fire questions round.
Yeah.
So, Anthony, favorite artist?
I'd have to say probably right now, Jerry Rafferty.
Nice choice.
Listening to him a lot. Don't know why.
Yeah. Favorite song?
Favorite song? My God, that's brutal. Well, I'm going to go with Weightless by Romy. I'd say my favorite song this week is Weightless by Romy off her new album, Midair. Yeah, I've been playing it on heavy rotation in my studio. at loud volume. So yeah, it's a great track. It's like a minimalist pop dance, everything but the girl meets Calvin Harris track, and it's really good. It gives me goosebumps just listening to it. So yeah, that's my favorite track right now.
We'll definitely check that one out. And finally, best gig ever.
Okay, the best gig ever, I think it would have to be a gig that I did. So when I was 18, when I was 18, 19, I went up to the Edinburgh festival, theater festival. And I'd written a musical, and it was me and a bunch of guys. And the musical actually managed to do pretty well. Like, we didn't close after 3 days like all the other shows. So we managed to do the whole run. And like after a few days, someone came up to us and said, would you play in this outdoor festival, on the top of the hill there? And so we said, yes, of course. And we played. And of course, up until then, I think we played to was like 3 people in the Mash Tun in Winchester or something like that. So we were playing in front of 3,000 people. And the sound was good, and it was a beautiful day, and I could actually hear what I was singing, and I could hear the drummer. It was like the first time it was actually, and I was like, oh my God, this is great. And we played the first song, and everybody applauded. And I was like, wow, this could be good. So yeah, I think that was my best gig ever.
I totally feel you on that one. And that must have been a pretty cool feeling.
Yeah, it was really good. Yeah.
Amazing. Great stuff. Well, listen, it's been wonderful to have you. I hope that people listening are now thinking about their sonic brand as well as their visual brand and brand strategy, and how and opportunities for activation with TikTok and everything in between. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been great to have you. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can so they can go to the Sixième Son website. I mean, Sixième Son is kind of a difficult word to pronounce. It's a French word, so probably they'll massacre the spelling, but they'll figure it out. There's no one else called Sixième Son. They can go to see my email is a.vanger@sixiemson.com, a.vanger@sixiemson.com, or they can get in touch with me on This Week in Music, which is on Instagram. It's this_week_in_music. So they can send me a message there. They can also send me a message on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and they can even write me a letter to 7 St. Leonard's
Old School
Terrace, London, SW3 4QB, United Kingdom. So yeah, they can
be careful. The fan mail is coming.
Fan mail is coming. Yeah. So yeah, they can get in touch with me on all those. I'd say LinkedIn is probably the easiest way, because you can just put in the name and then just connect, and my phone number's there as well. So
perfect. Great stuff. Well, an absolute pleasure as always. Great to see you. And I hope everybody's enjoyed listening, and look out for the next podcast from Dragon Rouge On. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.